Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. This week is the start of the A329M motorways. But what is an A329M motorway? It seems nobody knows for sure. Depending on which website you read, you get a slightly different answer each time. But the general idea is that an A329M motorway is built to bypass an existing road. So for example, a motorway that would offer an alternative route to the A329 would be called the A329M. Motorways numbered M, for example the M1, are usually built from scratch and not as an alternative to any particular A road. Small caveat, the rules are slightly different in Scotland, but watch the Scotland episodes, you'll work it out. With that all cleared up and out the way, let's get on to this week's motorway, the A329M. It runs for a whopping 4 miles and almost connects the towns of Reading and Bracknell. It used to be longer, but in the late 90s, the motorway had 2 miles stolen from it by buses. The local council decided they wanted to stick a bus lane in at the northern end, but the Highways Agency said absolutely not, or at least not whilst it was classed as a motorway. Determined to get what they wanted, the council downgraded 2 miles of motorway so they could install a bus lane, which in itself is about half a mile long, and it runs along the slip roads at the Sutton Siege roundabout. We've now got the A3290 in place of what was previously a section of the A329M, and as a result of these changes, it seems that the A329M has lost its junction numbers. To be fair, it may not have had any to begin with, but the Loddon or Loddon Bridge Interchange, which today serves as a terminus for the motorway, could have originally have been Junction 1. It seems there are no official junction numbers, just the 2 motorways end and an interchange in the middle. There may have been more junctions as well. At the northern end of the A3290, which used to be the A329M, there were plans for the motorway to continue by taking a turn to the west and connecting up with Vaston Road in Reading Town Centre. Had it done so, there may have been an additional junction number to think about. If we take a look at historical satellite images, we can see where space was left on Vaston Road for the motorway to connect up to it. However, redevelopment of the area has resulted in this no longer being visible. Whilst we're looking at the northern end, the flyover at Sutton Siege roundabout was a recent addition and was built as part of the A329M in 1989 to offer a direct connection to the Thames Valley Business Park. Of course, today it's no longer part of the A329M. The first section of the A329M would open in 1972, running from the Loddon or Loddon Bridge Interchange down to a temporary junction that was set up with the A321. There was supposed to be more motorway opening at the same time. That section would have been what we call today the A3290. The plan was for all of these sections to open at the same time, but disaster struck in late 1972 when the Loddon Bridge collapsed, killing 3 and injuring 10 others. The cause was put down to poorly designed false work. This is a term used to describe the temporary structures and framework that's used during bridge building. The design hadn't been built strong enough and the supporting structures failed, sending it and 500 tonnes of concrete down into the river below. The contractors, who were later found responsible, pleaded guilty to a breach of construction regulations and were fined £150, which in today's money is about £2,000. The bridge was repaired and the west section of the motorway opened a year later in 1973, with the remainder of the A329M's construction finishing in 1974. It wouldn't take long before they got bored and started to make a few changes. The Loddon or Loddon Bridge Interchange, when it opened, used to have a trumpet design layout, but this was altered in the late 1980s. They added a northwest joining slip road, giving the junction 5 slip roads to choose from. In the 90s, when the buses came along and the west section of the motorway was changed to the A3290, the slip road was turned into a bus-only lane following the introduction of a park and ride at the junction. Today, the slip road is no longer used and sits in a semi-derelict state. The underside of Loddon or Loddon Bridge has become a popular destination for graffiti artists. Some of you will already be shouting, "Vandalism!" But I really appreciate the level of work and effort that goes into this sort of stuff. I read that the art pieces change on a weekly basis, so there's always something new to come and have a look at. Is it really vandalism if it's providing a free art gallery? Culture is weird. Leaving the bridge behind and the motorway soon passes Dinton Pastures Country Park, where you'll find several lakes to enjoy. And interestingly, if it wasn't for the A329M, these lakes might not exist. The country park used to be a gravel quarry which opened at some point in the 19th century. It wasn't a particularly large-scale operation, with only a small area of excavation happening where today we find Sandford Lake. In the mid-1960s, a local contractor began digging out his own gravel on a new patch of land next door, and initially this really annoyed the council because they wanted to turn the place into a country park. In the end, they decided to allow Gary permission to remove a bit of gravel, as long as afterwards the site was left in such a way that would help them with the evolution of said country park. The council clearly had an endgame in mind, but with the construction of the A329M, decided to buy the land and expand the quarry so that it could supply gravel to build a motorway. It turns out building 6.5 miles of motorway requires over 1 million tonnes of gravel. What's interesting is that M Brook, a tributary to the River Loddon or Loddon, was diverted in order to excavate the gravel. And if you take a look at one of the islands found in Black Swan Lake, you might spot a river. This is actually the original brook, or at least a piece of it anyway. By 1976, all of the digging and quarry stuff came to an end. The site was cleared of any gravel workings, so the council could revert back to their original plan of turning it into a country park. What was left of the gravel pits was flooded, and the land was formed into what we see today, with the country park opening in 1979. Next up is the Mahusive Winnersh Interchange. It's where the A329M and the M4 motorways meet, and if you're thinking it looks a tad over-engineered, it's not, or at least it wasn't when they built it. To understand what I'm on about, we need to look back at the original plan for the A329M, which was for it to not be the A329M at all. It was going to be the M31 motorway. The M31 was supposed to run along the course of the A329M and connect up with the M3 at junction 3, but that's not all. Road planners realised that they could extend the M31 further to junction 10 of the M25. I don't know about you, but the M31 motorway seems like a pretty good idea to me. Nobody wants to sit on the M25 past Heathrow, and the M31 would have allowed for quite a nice bypass. But it never happened, because they decided it was a crap idea, and it was also part of the London Ringways project, which was mostly cancelled, and part of those cancellations included the M31. Instead, they decided to just widen the M4, which, according to several sources, cost just as much, if not more, than building an entirely new motorway. So with that all in mind, we can see why the Winnersh Interchange is so bloody massive. It was designed to handle the traffic that would be fed to it from the M25, the M3 and the M4. Today, not so much. In 2015, Highways England decided to change the layout of the interchange, managing to bugger it all up. On the southbound A329M, there were 2 lanes that went straight on, but this was changed to 1 lane and the other becoming a filter lane for the M4. Following the change, the accident and crash rate increased because drivers were expecting to go straight on, not turn left onto the M4, resulting in last-minute swerves from drivers looking to remain on the A329M. The accident rate was of such concern, the local council stepped in, looking to get things reverted back to how they were before. Highways England said, "Learn how to drive," and it's been that way ever since. Just after the Winnersh Interchange is a bridge that carries the A321 over the motorway. You'll recall from earlier that for a while the A329M ended here as a temporary solution whilst the rest of it was built. From this point onwards, we'll be driving along the newest section of the motorway, which opened in 1974. An interesting point to note is that the earlier sections of motorway were all built with a super wide central reservation to allow for the addition of more lanes at a later stage. However, the 1974 section of motorway wasn't built to such specification, and adding any more lanes to that bit would be near on impossible. At the Coppet Beach roundabout, the A329M comes to an end. Yep, that's about it. There's very little to explore along this short motorway. It's just a shame that they never built the A329M as the M31. We probably could have carried on from here. Had they built the southern extension, rather than the motorway curve round to meet the A329, it would most likely have taken a turn to the right to head around the west side of Bracknell, then crossed over the A3095 before smashing its way through the Swinley Forest on its way to the M3. Maybe this bit of forest here, I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet, awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Till then, take care, bye bye.